2025 has been a very weird year. It feels like I've played more games than ever, and yet as we get towards the end of the year and I start thinking about Game of the Year, top 10 games I've played, none come to mind. And it's not just me. The Game Award nominees just released, and it feels like there's maybe 5 games that were nominated for awards. Looking at this list, you'd be forgiven thinking that there weren't that many big game releases this year. But when you actually look at what came out, that's not true at all. There were a ton of releases that came out from huge game series, and yet they all seem to have been forgotten as we get towards the end of the year. And I want to talk about some reasons I think that might have happened. One thing you should never forget, though, is liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing to the channel, and becoming a member. So looking at the Game Award nominees, the big winners, of course, were Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, Ghost of Yotei, Hades 2, and Silksong. Those seem to be the big games that got a lot of nominations. But then you start thinking about all the other games that came out this year. There was a new Doom, there was a new Monster Hunter, there was a new Borderlands, there were 2 new Obsidian RPGs, Avowed and Outer Worlds 2, there was a new Mario Kart. Heck, even some of the games that did get nominated, Ghost of Yotei, Death Stranding, Silksong, these are huge and sometimes very long-awaited releases. It feels like nobody's talking about any of these games anymore. People waited like 10 years for Silksong, and within a couple months it already feels like nobody's talking about it anymore. This year, more than ever, feels like there is a lot of unmemorable games that came out. And it's interesting to think about why. I think it's easy to argue that if a new game comes out that is a sequel and it's just more of the same, then it's not going to leave an imprint. So that when you do get to the end of the year, you don't really look back in the same way as you did maybe its original release. When a game comes out and is a 10 out of 10, but then the sequel comes out, if it's the same game, why is it suddenly in 9 out of 10, an 8.5 out of 10? Once you take away that novelty, you do actually need to do something to still be memorable. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to revolutionize the genre. Look at last year's Game of the Year nominees. Metaphor, ReFantazio. Essentially just a Persona game, but instead of in a high school, it was in a fantasy world. Astrobot, a 3D platformer. Really nothing special about Astrobot as far as its setting. It just also had a lot of shoutouts to other PlayStation and Sony and video game products. Helped make them memorable. Metaphor had a banging soundtrack that I still think about every day. It lives rent-free in my head, probably till the end of time. But then you look at this year's big releases. Doom, The Dark Ages. I didn't really like it. I thought the changes they made were a downgrade and moved away from that core idea of the Doom Slayer. The music was much less interesting without Mick Gordon in there. Monster Hunter, personally, I've never been big in that series, so to me this is just another Monster Hunter. I tried to play it, and what do you know, it's just another Monster Hunter. Borderlands 4 is another Borderlands. It's better than 3 and Tiny Tina's, but it's still just Borderlands. They didn't really do much to change it. Avowed is just another fantasy RPG. Mario Kart World, if anything, is memorable for the wrong reasons, because they have way too many tracks that they make you race that are essentially just straight lines. And this seems to be a common theme with games in general. Games seem to be losing their soul. I've talked about it in a few videos that I yearn for going back to that Xbox 360 era of gaming. That, to me, is when games really peaked. You had a bunch of interesting, new, different games, a lot of developers exploring what they could do with the medium, pushing the limits in some ways, and it just doesn't feel like that's there anymore. Personally, I do think a lot of it has to do with technology. Everything has to be realistic, all the games have to have all these features, and they just lose sight of what actually makes games fun, which is engaging gameplay, good stories, unique visuals. It doesn't have to be realistic, just unique and consistent visual style and an actual style. It's not that there weren't games that came out this year. It's not even that there weren't good games. I, for the most part, enjoyed Borderlands 4. I liked Avowed. The new Doom maybe was my least favorite of the new Dooms, but it was still a very competent shooter. Expedition 33 was a solid RPG. But now at the end of the year, looking back, it's just that none of them really stand out as, yes, that is the game of the year. It feels like a game of the year. We seem to have just had the perfect storm of solid but not outstanding games this year. There were a lot of games, just none of them are really outstanding. So when you think of this has to be the game of the year, it's really hard to even come up with a short list, let alone pick one that feels like it truly deserves it. And I think a lot of what feeds into this lack of memorability in games is this unending hype conundrum that seems to have overtaken the gaming landscape. This is something that I'm sure has existed for a long time, but I've really noticed gotten a lot worse over the last few years. Every game that seems to come out now has to be unreasonably and borderline unbelievably hyped. It's the biggest thing. It's the newest thing. Everybody has to be playing it. Remember Among Us, Fall Guys, Valheim, Pal World? These huge games that everybody's talking about and are selling millions and millions and millions of copies, breaking Steam player counts. And then a month later, nobody's talking about it. Nobody's playing those games anymore because a new game has come out. When this is how we ingest media, of course you're going to forget what stands out because every new thing is trying to push out the previous thing. This has to be the hypest game, the game that you have to play. Don't play anything else. Right now, that game I think is Arc Raiders. Everybody's going nuts over that game. And in a month or two, I'm sure it'll be something else. Talked about it in my Expedition 33 video as well. That was a good game that got way overhyped as the second coming of video games. And honestly, as much as I did enjoy that game, as much as it probably still will be my game of the year, I'm really not excited that it got nominated so many times at the Game Awards. Because all that says to me is we're going to get 50 more copies of this game, and the games are going to be created not because somebody has a passion project, but because some executive decided this is the way that we'll make millions and millions of dollars. And the games, much like the ones I talked about earlier, they're going to lose their soul. They're not going to have a soul. I maybe am not as hyped on Expedition 33 as everyone else, but it did have a soul. They tried, and that counts so much more to me than maybe copy-pasting an existing game. So I'm happy for Expedition 33, but at the same time, I am nervous about what is going to happen when it probably sweeps the Game Awards in a month or so. And this year has made me hesitant on gaming in general. This is the first year in a long time where I really can't think of any game that absolutely loved. Not just one. Usually it's difficult for me to make my top fives at the end of the year because there are so many games that are at least on that edge of like, oh yeah, that was a really good game. Was it better than this one? Did I enjoy it more? And I have to really think about it. But this year it feels like I don't even know what I would want to put in the top five because nothing really stuck with me in that way. And that's sad to me because I love gaming. And I know most of the people making video games love it too, and don't want their games to be forgotten about. But what do you think? Was this a great year for gaming? Let me know in the comments down below. What is your game of the year that maybe everybody seems to have forgotten about? If you liked the video, please be sure to hit the like button, leave a comment, consider subscribing to the channel. It really does help out a lot. And I will see you all with the next video.